All right, so I'm going to say this right at the top of the video. I was wrong about Chester, kind of. So I did unlock Chester, and I finished pushing him up to 500 trophies, and today I just want to talk about my experience pushing him, what I think about the brawler right now, and what I think could possibly end up happening to him in the future. Just as like a spark notes, I think he's okay. I don't think he's great. I don't think he's bad. I think he's just kind of average, and I think he just feels better than he probably should, and we'll talk about that towards the end of the video. But if you unlock Chester, let me know what you think about him down in the comments. And if you didn't unlock Chester, who are you working on unlocking right now? Let me know that as well. And if you're new and you enjoy my rambling, make sure you leave a like and subscribe to the video. And with all this out of the way, let's get started with talking about Chester. So first off, I only pushed him up to rank 20. I know that's kind of low, but I did push him in the 600, 650 range with Roe towards the end of my push. So I did get some experience over 600 trophies with him. Also, I only leveled him up to level 9 and I bought his star power and his gadget. I don't think that you need to level brawlers up to level 10 and 11 unless you're really trying to push trophies with them or if you're playing Power League. It's just a really heavy investment for a lot of people, so I didn't bother doing it despite how many coins I have. All right, now let's talk about Chester's main attack. Now, this is what I really undervalued about Chester. I did not think his main attack was going to be as crazy as it actually ended up being, but that's very predicated on him having the star power that's out right now, the one that adds the 4th bell attack into his rotation. And that's because if you're in the right attack rotation where you shoot 2, then 3, then 4 bells, then you're going to be able to do 9,000 damage at point blank range, which means you're basically going to be able to kill any tank except for Frank when they get up into your face. However, running this star power also makes him way more RNG than people are actually talking about, because what it does, it changes your attack pattern so that instead of it just always being a 1-2-3 rotation, it changes into a 1-2-3, 2-3-4 type rotation where it's always constantly changing over and over again. So you do need to keep that in mind when you're playing him. It does make him super RNG, not only just with his super and his gadget, but also with his main attack too. And that can also be really annoying because there will be times when someone gets in your face, you'll be on the 1-2-3 attack rotation and you won't be able to kill them, but there will be other times where you're on the 2-3-4 and you'll just shred them. So it's not always like the best thing to have to run this star power, but I will say that I thought it was going to be a really bad star power. I thought that you were always going to want to run the star power that lets you know what your next super is going to be, but it turns out this star power is actually pretty decent. It gives you a much wider attack on your 4th attack. It also gives you that crazy burst damage access, so there are definitely good things about this star power if you want to run it and you're okay with the RNG on your main attack. However, running the other star power is going to keep your damage a lot more consistent, and it's going to let you know what your next super is in your rotation. So it's technically going to make you a little more consistent by giving you that bit of information, as well as keeping your damage always constant at a 1-2-3 rotation. So at the end of the day, I think people are really going to prefer the damage star power just because it gives you that crazy amount of burst damage. But I think if you play him on like Power League, or you're trying to push him like super high trophies, or if you're a competitive player, you're probably going to want to run the other star power. Also, if you run the gadget that's out right now, you get to re-roll your super. So if you don't like the super that's coming up, you can just swap that out. But of course, there's never any guarantee with this brawler. So even if you re-roll your super, you might not get the one you need. And that brings me to talking about his supers. And his supers are okay. They're not crazy good. They're not like terribly bad. They're just okay. And he definitely has a lot of tools in his kit. He can definitely do a lot of things. He's got damage over time. He's got stuns. He's got wall breaks. So he definitely has a lot of tools in his kit. But the problem is how he can pull those tools out is never any consistent. And I know people have said that there's some kind of logic behind what kind of super they give you. I can confirm that is not true. That you would never get a super depending on what you need in certain situations. There's only one way I found of manipulating your super, and that's if you have your super in hand and you die, you will always respawn with the bomb super in hand. It'll change out whatever you had to the bomb, always 100% of the time. That's what I found. But other than that, there's no way to consistently get heals or stuns or anything like that. It's all just random. At least that's my experience. If you experience something different, please let me know down in the comments, because I hated this aspect of this brawler. I cannot stand the RNG supers. And that's because there's definitely times when you get screwed on your super. For example, if you're getting poked by like a long range brawler and you end up getting your super in hand and you could use the heal because they just won't leave you alone, you end up getting the stun, and that has short range, so it doesn't really help you out. So then you reroll, hoping to get the heal, and they give you the smoke, which really doesn't help bail you out of that situation at all either. That's just a situation off the top of my head. I don't know if that ever happened to me specifically, but that's just like one thing that would definitely happen. Also, one thing I noticed, and this could just be me, and I could just be hyper-focusing on the supers that I don't like, but I feel like you get the stuns and the slows a lot more often than you get like the bomb and the heal, which I think were the two best. It just seems that way because the bomb just seems more useful, but I almost feel like I never got the bomb. Unless, of course, like I said, I had my super and I died. Then I would spawn with the bomb. But the heal just like never came up for me. And I always got stuck with the slow. And actually, you know what? We're just going to talk about each individual super on their own merits. And I'll give you my thoughts on that. So let's jump into that real quick. All right, first off, the slow. The slow is my least favorite of the supers. Not because it's necessarily bad, but the problem with it is you're hoping that people jump on you because the area of effect isn't that big where you can just drop it and people will step in it. You need people to get on top of you, and most good players are going to know not to get in Chester's face. And then on top of that, it's not really needed if you're running the star power that's out right now, the one that gives you your 4th bell, because then your burst damage is so high that you're never really going to need the slow in most situations. You'll be able to burst people down. Next up, the stun. Now, I'll admit I did not have a good time with the stun because it's a major skill issue for me, but the good things about the stun, it does a lot of damage, and the stun lasts quite a while. I think it's either a full second or a second and a half, which is really good. So I'll admit it's a good super for most people. For me personally, I did not have a good time with it. I had a hard time landing it consistently. For some reason, I feel like the projectile moves a little bit slower than everything else in Chester's kit. Could be wrong. I don't like measure projectile speeds and stuff like that. Plus, I also feel like the range on it was really short. So that was another thing. It moves slow and it doesn't move far. Like I said, I could be wrong on that stuff. I just had a hard time using the stun personally, and I wasn't like too much of a fan of it. I will say I did get better at using it as I pushed more with Chester. I got more comfortable with it. For the most part, I think it's one of the bottom of the 5 supers for me personally. I just wasn't a fan of it. Next up, the heal. Super useful. This is like crazy good amount of healing. My Chester's level 9 and he heals like 3,400, 3,500 HP using this. It's very useful, but like I said earlier, it comes up probably the least often of all the supers, so you can never really plan around getting it. It's more of like, oh sweet, I got the heal, now I can use it. Also, another thing I didn't like about the heal is it takes like a full second to start healing you up. It doesn't kick in instantly, but overall the heal is good, and if it came up more often, I would say it's probably the best of his supers, but because I feel like the game is weighted to not giving you the heal, I feel like it's not that like amazing. Next up, the smoke, and in my opinion, the smoke is probably one of his best supers. I really like this because you can hit somebody like one time, then if you hit them with the smoke, they're pretty much dead if they're like a 4,000 HP brawler, because the smoke does like 3,000 damage and your main attack does like 1,000 damage per projectile. So you'll hit them with the smoke, they'll start ticking down, and then you don't really have to worry about them anymore. They'll just die. The only thing I don't like about the smoke is it feels like, again, just like with the stun, it feels like it's a really short range, especially compared to his main attack. Again, I could be wrong. I don't measure range and projectile speed and stuff like that, but it just felt like it was a little bit shorter. Felt like I needed to inch up a little bit closer every time I tried to use the smoke. And then finally, there's Chester's Big Bomb, and in my opinion, this is definitely his best of all his supers. It does the most damage. It can clear walls, which, depending on the matchup, Chester does like to have open walls. If you're going against a lot of long-range brawlers, you want to keep your walls intact because you won't be able to outrange them. But if it's a lot of like tanks or like more mid-range brawlers, then you're going to want to use this to open up the map, because Chester's area of effect with his main attack is just crazy easy to hit people with. Like as long as they're anywhere within the cone, you're going to be able to hit them. Personally, if I had to rank his supers, I would say the bomb is his best. Like I said, it does a lot of damage and it adds the most utility to his kit. Then I would say his heal is probably the next up, even though it seemed to come up the least often. When it does come up, it can be very useful. Then for his third super, I would say it's probably the smoke. Like I said, the only problem I had with that is that the range seems to be really short on it. For number 4, I would say it's probably the stun. Even though I had major skill issues with it, I can definitely see it being very useful. It has a ton of utility. It does good damage. So overall, very good. And then the slow is the least useful in my opinion. It can come in handy in certain situations, but for the most part, Chester doesn't really need it, and people know to stay away from Chester, so it's not really like 100% useful all the time. Real quick, I just want to touch on his gadget before I talk about my final thoughts on Chester. His gadget is okay. Right now, we only have the one that rerolls his supers, and this is probably going to be the one people want to run the most often. And personally, I feel like it's a decent gadget, but the issue I have with it is that there's only 3 uses of it, and you can burn through those 3 uses very quickly in any given match if they give you the wrong supers at the wrong time. I would actually advocate for this gadget specifically to be the first of all the gadgets to be able to be used 4 or 5 times in a match, and that might seem overpowered to some people, but in my opinion, it's really not. All this gadget does is reroll your super, and you're still at the mercy of RNG, so it's not like it guarantees you to be able to swap into the super you need every time. So having more uses on it, I don't think is that big of a deal. Obviously, you don't want to have like 10 uses, because then at that point, it kind of defeats the purpose of Chester's super being random. But at the same time, having 5 uses will actually give it more utility, because like I said, you can burn through the 3 on this gadget very quickly. So let's go over my final thoughts on Chester really quick before we end this video. Overall, I think Chester right now is a solid brawler. I really underestimated how much damage he can output with his main attack, but I will say I was definitely right about his super. You definitely get screwed in certain situations when you need certain supers, but you end up getting others, and you reroll and you still don't get the super you need. So in my opinion, it's definitely hard to play around his super most of the time. And honestly, I think he's being hard carried by the damage output on his main attack. If they ever nerf the damage on his main attack, which I don't know if they're going to or not. I don't know if this is the way they intended for him to be played. But if they end up nerfing the damage on his main attack, he will fall off really hard because you can't play around his supers doing enough damage consistently. And if his main attack can't make up for that damage supplement, he really doesn't offer too much to a team in terms of damage, which is his main job. So I'll admit he's a really fun brawler to play. You can definitely troll some people depending on like how you play him and stuff like that. At the same time, I feel like as soon as they nerf his damage, he's going to fall off really hard, and he's not really going to be that good of a brawler. That's just my opinion. I don't know what you guys think, but anyway. So if I had to give Chester a number score, I'd probably say he's like a 7 out of 10. He's really good right now. You might even be able to rate him a little bit higher than that, but the problem is, like I said, as soon as they nerf him, he's going to fall off pretty hard, in my opinion, if they nerf his damage specifically. They could probably nerf his health, and he probably wouldn't fall off too hard, but if they nerf his main attack damage, he's definitely going to get hit pretty hard. But hey, that's just my opinion. You can feel free to let me know yours down in the comments. Like I said before, I like to hear what people think about this type of stuff. Anyway, that's going to do it for this video. I want to thank you guys for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.